Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
First, I want to ask you, as I ask all my guests, a couple of questions. But first, talk about your origin story, how you got interested in podcasting, and how you got connected to James Altucher and the other projects that you work on. What is it about podcasting in particular? Now you're on the other side of the microphone. I'm
Right,
as
yeah.
the engineer, not Jay. So Jay, introduce yourself. Where are you from? What's your origin story?
Hi, so my name is Jay. I'm from Malaysia. Like James and I always have this. James created the origin story for me, right? So this is James' version. I'm gonna tell James' version first. James' version is, James was walking down the street in Soho, New York, and then he saw a Chinese person sitting in front of his hotel, and then he's like, this guy can be my engineer. I don't know any Chinese. I don't know. I don't know any English and everything. So I just followed James. He looks like an honest person with the hair, and then I learned all the English from James. But yeah, but my origin story is I'm from Malaysia. Um, Initially, my biggest dream is to win a Grammy, and I'm always a audio engineer by heart. So I work in studio for music, for post production for TV. But one day, it is just pure luck. James just came in the studio, and then so the studio that I work in, the system is like we got randomly assigned to sessions.
Yeah.
So I just got assigned to James sessions. That time in my brain, podcast I thought is just like a radio drama. Do you remember radio drama back in the 60s?
Yeah, I don't remember, but I know of them. Yeah.
Yeah, well, but like the 80s doesn't really the 60s doesn't really come to Malaysia until the 2000s. So
the speed of light was a
speed of light, yeah. Yeah, so what happened is, I'm like, oh, this is just another voiceover session for me. I thought in my head, I'm like, so I just set up, I just sit there, I just ready to go, and then James walks in with, do you know Jesse Isler?
I know the name.
So Jesse Isler is one of James' guests. Then, and then they would just have this fascinating conversations, and then I'm like, this is great. Is this podcast? So I just went out and told my studio manager, like, hey, every time James comes and book the studio, just assign me on it. Like I want to work with James. I want to work on these awesome sessions. So I've been working with James since, and then the studio closed. So what happened is when the studio closed, I just reached out to James. I told him, the studio closed. I would love to still work with you. I can take on a role. I know this. I know the studio scenes around the city. I can help you book any studio, help you schedule everything, so you don't have to worry about booking and scheduling. So, and then I just went on become James' recording engineer. Then, and then sooner or later, all of a sudden, it's became his assistant because I start helping him with with photos, with any IT needs that he needs, and any scheduling that I can help. And James like, hey, you know, just be my assistant, and also at the same time be the producer for the show. So yeah, that's my origin story into podcasting.
So it's funny to me because I got a new idea for your first book, which we called "Losing the Grammy."
Losing the Grammy, yeah.
It worked for me. And secondly, how you kind of preemptively, and maybe the reason that you guys resonate so much is because you have sort of a rapport that's based on similar, kind of similar ideas that you kind of presage this notion of choosing yourself. Like you could have just said, well, like, who am I? And I the gatekeeper's got to decide, but you went out there and pushed yourself ahead. And all of a sudden that made all the difference in the world.
It is, yeah, because like, see, if I never worked with James before, that wouldn't have crossed my mind. So like I learned so much just by working for James during that I think it's only 6 months before the studio closed. She came at the end of the studio life. So yeah, so like during the 6 months I learned so much. I learned about negotiating, I learned about choosing yourself. You have to go out there, and the power of ask is very, very important because like you just ask. The worst thing they can say is no.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
So I just asked, hey, I love working with you. I think I'm pretty sure you'll like me. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, and the dynamic with me and James is that every time when we're in the same room, when we first started working, we didn't really talk as much because I'm an introvert myself. So he would just work on his stuff. I would just work on my stuff, and then we have small chit chat, and then we go back working. I think that sort of kick off the relationship in the sense that I don't bother him if he's busy.
Mm.
Like I'm not one of those person that have to talk to you, even though when you're working on something. So I think he liked that side of me. Uh, although now have changed. Now I'm just like every time James here, we just talk about anything. We just talk about I would just ask him any questions, and then he would have an awesome answer. Then I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I look at it and I think, wow, Jay is one of James's most frequent guests. I mean, you guys do episodes. They're supposed to be solo episodes or just Jay. And then it's Jay, and you have so much insight. I was just listening to, one where you did recently, and you're talking about like, people that chose their artistic sensibilities over choosing, financial remuneration. And you're like,
Right.
just like quoting all these things like Rocky 5 was about that because one of the people that you guys are, I'm like, how does he know that? Like, I didn't know that. And I'm from like 150 miles away from Rocky, where Rocky was filmed. Like,
Right.
Jay
Right.
was in Malaysia during this whole time. Like, how could that possibly be?
Well,
So,
the thing is like that. Well, the thing is that's it because sometimes when James and I talk, we talk about Rocky. Sometimes, sometimes I would just like, "Hey, James, have you seen this about Rocky?" And then we would talk about it. And then sometimes James would be like, "Hey, do you know about this?" And then we would talk about it. So like, sometimes I learn news from James, and James learn news from me. I think James learned a lot more pop culture from me, and I learn news from him because I'm a little bit younger than James.
yeah.
So I'll just tell him all the pop references out there. Yeah, and but the thing is, but that's why I say you're so great because you can keep up with James. Like a lot of time, I can't keep up with James. Like his thought process is so fast and so out there. I really can't keep up. That's why I say I always love listening to your conversation with James because you guys have such a. It's like I'm s- I'm still at in with Intel Pentium 4, and then now you guys are Intel i7 or i9, the
No,
processor.
I've got a Commodore 64 up here. But the thing that I notice about you, and we've gotten to know each other, and that's one of my favorite things about coming on the show is you and I get to chat. We email all the
Yeah.
time. First of all, you're extremely generous, but the other thing is you're extremely curious. And
Yeah.
as far as like listening, keeping up with the speed, one thing that works for me is I'll listen to James on 2x. Right before I come on the show, I'll listen to James at 2x, which is really, really fast. But then when I
Right.
speak to him at 1x, it sounds like I'm talking like this. So
Exactly.
that's one of my hacks. You've given me plenty of hacks. But I want to talk about what means the most to you about audio as a medium, as opposed to video, which is a different medium. I've actually just taken my YouTube videos, make sure I have good audio, push it to audio as well. But you focus on the audio. There's a concept in Judaism, which is my language. I know you're going to convert to it after the circumcision.
Well,
Uh,
yep. Tomorrow I'm gonna go. I actually live a block. Like that. I think there's what you call Jewish temple.
yeah, temple. Yeah.
Yeah, it's right across from me.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I heard they have some of those in New York City.
Yep.
I'm not mistaken.
It's the funniest thing is it's on the same block as one of the biggest church in my. Yep. And
Yeah.
then
Well, wait.
my neighborhood is so Jewish that the Dunkin' Donuts downstairs my apartment, it's kosher.
It's
So they
kosher.
don't have.
I
Yep,
am
they don't
coming
have
over
meat.
there, man. I haven't had a
Yep.
good Dunkin' Donuts that's kosher in
Yep.
many, many years. There aren't many in San Diego. First of all, there aren't
Oh.
very few Dunkin' Donuts out here. But in Judaism, which undoubtedly from your study of Judaism over these past years learning Hebrew, we have like in Catholicism they have the Our Father prayer. They have a prayer called Our Father. It's called a
Mhm.
catechism. It's like a statement of faith of the religion that they believe God is in heaven and His name is holy and there'll be peace among. In Judaism, there's an analog of that, and it's called the Shema. And Shema in
Mhm.
Hebrew means hear or listen. And actually, in this prayer itself, or in these words that we say every day, 3 times a day, it has the following phrase. It says, "Do not follow after listen, follow your ears. Do not follow after your eyes or your heart that make you turn away, turn astray." And I wondered, do you think that audio is deeper than visual. Like we've all been attracted to like, you know, the opposite sex or
Right.
whatever. I don't care. You know, whatever your choice is fine by me. But, you know, I'm not saying you, Jeb, just saying in general, the listeners that will listen to this, I'll tell you. But my point is, like, we've all been led astray by something that's beautiful visually, appeals to us visually. And you never hear a politician goes down in a huge sex scandal because he listened to some, you know, person's voice. You know, it's always they followed after their eye. What is it about audio that is deeper, that stimulates the brain so much more than the eyes?
It's really funny because I've been thinking about that. Not I wouldn't say quite often. A little bit. It's that, you know, every time when you put on headphones versus you are looking at a screen, like even if you close your eyes, you like you know, like the phrase, you can hear them in your head. You can see them in your head, but you can hear them in your head. You know, because if you're putting on the headphones, like you feel like the person is right beside you talking into your ear.
Yes.
But when you see a monitor screen, that's a layer of separations with the visual. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, like I'm looking to. I mean, you know, I'm looking at you in the monitor. It's felt like, yeah, you're there, and I can instantly tell you are not beside me. But if you're listening to podcasts, if you close your eyes, you almost felt like they are beside you. You know, that's why they say the podcasting is such a successful medium, is because when you listen on your headphones, it felt like they are there listening to you.
Right.
I don't know if you have this experience. If you follow one person on YouTube all the time versus you follow that person's podcast all the time, you feel closer to him when you're listening to the podcast rather than watching his YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can tell like he's probably faking some stuff on visual. You know, like you said, like the Judaism, they say like visual can deceive you more than, you know, the audio can. And fun fact, I actually is attracted to voices more than visual.
Yeah, it actually does take place. Actually, in the Orthodox Judaism, you men and women are separated visually, but you're also not supposed to hear women sing. And I agree with you. You know, I used to think, oh, that's stupid. That's so sexist. But, you know, it is true that there are, you know, between the concept of now take what's the highest level, it's something that's invisible and inaudible, namely God, right? So if you believe in God, and I never proselytize, that's against my religion to proselytize. But in Judaism, like we believe God is unseeable. You can't see him and you can't hear him directly. And if you do, you're supposed to go to see a psychiatrist or, you know, check yourself into a mental. But that's the whole point. And so when I'm at synagogue or temple or whatever, you know, it's always harder for me to keep my mind on the invisible, inaudible God than it is to look at my wife or my wife's beautiful voice or listen to it. So, yeah, I don't think it's and by the way, it could be for women too. I don't know. I don't know what that experience is. So I don't think it's necessarily sexist. I think it's necessarily capitulating to the fact that the human mind has such a hard job conceptualizing God at all that almost it would be better to be in like a sensory deprivation tank than anything else.
Right. Yeah, and also like I don't know if this relate, but like when you're younger, like when you're just born, the first thing you hear about other than the doctor and the nurses before you know your eyes, you know, it's open, you probably hear your mom's voice first. You
That's
know,
right.
that probably comes
They say you can hear your parents' voices. The babies can sense the parents' voices inside the womb, and they certainly can't see anything. You know, I always ask my kids, "What's your earliest memory?" And it's not like, "Oh, I remember you telling me the Schrodinger equation when I was 5 months gestation." Well, my kids might do that. Speaking of Judaism, I want to ask you some of the questions that I ask all my guests that come on. It's not really specific to Judaism, but but there's a concept in Judaism of an ethical will, something that you want to give to people in terms of wisdom. You are what I consider, you know, like kind of pan-cultural, that you've been in so many different cultures, you've adapted to so many different things. We'll get to like your life advice to your former self later on today, but I want to know like what you've learned so far from your experiences in America, you know, working with James, obviously, but even things outside of working with James. I'm interested in you specifically. what wisdom have you learned that you want to give to the future, not on terms of, monetary, bequeathing something financially, but what do you want to give the world in terms of wisdom? I know you're young, but still, you've had so many experiences. And my question is,
Right.
what kind of wisdom could you distill as an inheritance, as a will for future generations?
Well, so I don't know if this is important at all, but at least it's important for me. And I stood by pretty much once I got here to the States, is that be able to be be able to be able to be able to adapt in any situations and be flexible, or if you're born in the Western country, make sure you spend some time in Asian country, because Western culture and Asian culture are two different things, but they should be combined into one to make a whole. Like my perspective changed so much. I've been in Malaysia for my longest life, so I live in Malaysia for 24 years. So I always follow the Asian rule, Asian culture, or whatever. And then came here, and then I start seeing all this thing and start learning and adapting all this thing, and that sort of just mold me into who I am today. It's to combine the Western culture and Western mentality with the Asian culture and Asian mentality. It's you pick, but of course, you pick the best of both. You don't just combine them all entirely. You pick the best of both, and be able to be flexible. That's actually very, very, very hard, and it's very important, because I've seen a lot of people that came from Asia to here, and they would just stick to their way. They're like, oh, this is why I do things. This is how I do things. I'm not gonna change my thing. I'm not gonna change my lifestyle to fit other lifestyle. And then sooner or later they got depressed, and then they went back home. Yeah. So it's very important to be able to adapt to new ideas. Probably one of the most important things.
Very nice. And we're talking with with Jay Wujun Yao, who is the super producer. He rocks the mic and the turntables. He is the DJ that we turn to when we want to BJ. So I want to talk about, and of course you're very heavily acknowledged in James's new book. I want to ask you, well, let me ask you first. Do you believe, you've heard me kind of be bearish and negative about extraterrestrials. You've heard Avi Loeb, professor at Harvard, be bullish. Do you think, A, there are extraterrestrials, and B, do you think that we're living in a simulation? Where do you come down on those two?
Okay, so I'm a huge fan of superheroes movie and superhero comics. Obviously, I would hope that we will have some sort of alien that wear red tights, and blue tights or whatever. But I maybe there is. I'm not a physicist. You're a scientist, of physicist. Obviously, you know better than me. But for me, life would mean differently outside of the Earth. I would say, maybe what we consider life form or carbon-based life form would be different in outside of Earth. It could be something that maybe doesn't need oxygen, maybe doesn't need air, maybe doesn't need water, but maybe they are living, or maybe they're not living. Living is just living is subjective, right? The tree is living, the rock could be living too,
Right. Exactly.
For all we know, but they're just not moving, or there's no way to define, or no way to define their livingness. Or I'm not sure, I don't know if you have seen this experiment, someone take two glasses of water. One, they say gratitude stuff to the water, and the other one, they just yell at the water or say negative thing to the water, and then I don't know, somehow they crystallize it, and then they put it under microscope. That they both are very different. The one that was given the gratitude and appreciations formed more beautiful than the other one. I don't know if you have seen the experiment.
No, it sounds a little suspicious to me, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could be wrong. It could be some BuzzFeed stuff that I read somewhere, but
right.
but I always believe in living is probably just subjective. Everyone's
Right.
it's hard to define that. And are we living in simulations? I heavily believe we are living in simulations. Maybe because I'm a gamer, so I sort of see the sign
Yeah.
or something like that. But I do believe we're living in simulations, because why would you spawn into that body and then everyone else could be what I call NPCs, non-player control, non-player character. So I don't know. I
What's
really don't know.
your favorite game in terms of like the one that most expands your mind? I mean, keep in mind, I don't play many computer games, but for
Right.
which one is like, because I know my kids get really wrapped up in Minecraft, and there's this meta layer where it
Right.
actually relates to physicists and so forth to think about these issues of consciousness that you were just talking about. Anyway, what for you? Let me ask you two questions. What is there a game that you could recommend to me, knowing that I have a limited amount of time and bandwidth, that is so important? Like, you got me on Clubhouse, and you thought that was so important for me, and you were right, and I thank you for that. Now we did James as well, so now it's leveraging all this. But is there anything that would benefit my brain, my capacity, or whatever? And I'm just ignorant of it because I don't follow that aspect of technology.
Well, I mean, games. There's a couple way of looking at games. So, do you want to play for the story? So, like for me, I only play two categories of games. Maybe three. Two main categories. Is one is story driven. Like you read books to know story. You read to learn stories. For me, I learn story from playing games. How people say, like, you live 1,000 different life if you play, if you read the books. For me, I live 1,000 life by playing games. That's like, a lot of games out there that I just love their stories. Their story is so beautiful. And then the other one, it's because obviously right now we are adults, so I only have limited time to play. So I would play games that's sort of competitive but casual at the same time, that I can play and then it's done, and then I can reset again. I can play again. So for the story one, one of my favorite is called BioShock Infinite, because they explore alternate reality and multiverse. In that game, I'm gonna spoil it to you. Towards the end, they just say that each stars, it's a portal to a different universe. Yeah, so they came up with this technology to pull different people, to pull the same person from different universe to their universe, to to achieve whatever plan they have.
Right.
Yeah, so
So
that
game
game
leads them to go to GameStop, and they have to pick up the stock.
Yeah, and then the stock just go down and stuff like that. But yeah, that game just blew my mind. And then I just love science since I was younger. So like, just like anything that they have to do with science.
And they put the two of them together. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got time for one or two more questions?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
great. So in this experience and kind of like thinking about technology and its exponential growth, but also kind of its hazards and sort of the negative stuff that you've seen by proxy. I mean, I was hurt, when James was attacked, assailed, criticized by Jerry Seinfeld this summer. When you're dealing with that, I see you as a very valuable role. You're not only a sounding board, you contribute. You're a star character. You are a player character on the James Altucher Show. But do you sometimes feel a little bit of a burden, Jay, as if you're a therapist? I mean, we can all be therapists, by the way. I mean, I have a strength therapist that's a personal trainer. At least I used to, if you can't tell. But do you feel like you are kind of a coach or a therapist in a certain way?
Not really.
Or he to you?
He to me, for sure. For James, to me, that's for sure. Like every time. He almost like a father figure to me. Like we will talk about stuff, and then I will ask him for advice. He would give me a great advice. For me, I think I'm a bad influencer and enabler. He's like, "Oh, I just want to play chess." I'm like, "Yeah, sure, let's play chess. Let's watch you play chess." And then we just play. I was just there. We just talk, and then he play chess. But my role is pretty much just like, okay, what is James wasting time on right now? And I can turn that into content. So James been playing a lot of chess, like a huge amount of chess. I'm like, well, you should just stream. You should start streaming on Twitch. And then he's like, no, no. And then I keep, of course, I keep saying like, you should stream, keep streaming, keep streaming. So I managed to get him to stream a couple times on Twitch. So that actually turned into content, which you saw it on the Twitter yesterday. So like I realized, like if James want to do something, that's nothing that we can stop him from doing it. So that's why being able to adapt and be flexible is very important. Is that okay? He's gonna do that thing no matter what anyway. So I have to think of a way to turn what he's doing into content, or or something that at least I can put it out there, or we can put it out there. So like anything can be monetized, anything can be content, so so that's just me. So like I just trying to see like how I can help James, because James helped me tremendously. So my role is to make sure I able to help James grow.
And you do a phenomenal job. And the last question I have, I ask all the guests that honor me by their presence on the Into the Impossible podcast, relates to the name of the podcast in the following sense. And I think you'll resonate with some of these laws that Arthur C. Clarke set up and put forth many, many decades ago. The first one is that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And this is a quote that I think someone in technology, in game playing, etc., the stuff that you see now, it's like futuristic, sometimes comes true in the not so distant future. So that's certainly true. The other thing we talk about a lot is like, what does it mean to be an expert? And Arthur C. Clarke said, for every expert, there's an equal and opposite expert. So that's kind of funny to me that, one person will say something, and if we never just take, oh, you're a scientist? Yeah, okay, Isaac Newton, I'm not going to investigate general relativity, Galileo. I'll just take Einstein. I'll just take your word for it. No, we always want to question the experts.
Right.
But his third law is really relates to advice to your former self. And the way I phrase it is basically the name of this podcast. Arthur Clarke used to say, the only way of discovering the limits of the possible is to venture a little way past them into the impossible. So what you think is impossible, you must try to venture into. And so that's the name of the podcast. I want to ask you, when you were half your current age, was there a piece of advice or some knowledge that you could give to the younger, Jay Wujun, and then tell him that something will be possible only if he has the courage, strength, stamina, hit points, whatever, to go into the impossible?
Always ask the girl that you have crush on out. Always, the thing is, it's more like always ask. So Asian culture, I mean, maybe it's just me, we are afraid of ask. Like we are afraid of rejection, which is I would say like 50% of the people out there always afraid of rejections. What? So like I'm pretty sure I missed a lot of opportunity by just not asking, by just assuming they will say no. So these two things I will tell to my younger self is always ask and never assume anything. Like I wouldn't like, so if I want to hang out with you tomorrow, I will ask right now. I wouldn't assume like tomorrow is Friday, Brian's probably busy, doing blah, blah blah. I would just ask. So yeah, ask is very important, and never assume anything, and never expect, and don't expect anything.
That's really brilliant. I'm glad you said that, because there have been studies done that I read. There was a famous accident that took place on a Korean Airlines plane in San Francisco about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe more. And they traced a lot of the root cause to the co-pilot, who was really smart and very knowledgeable, but he was scared to kind of ask, like, are you sure you want to land without the landing gear, or whatever they did wrong, or this instrument approach during perfect weather conditions. And they said at least at Korean Airlines, now we know that that Malaysia is very different, of course, but I think
Malaysian airline is gone missing.
What's that?
Malaysia's airplane always is gone missing. We don't ask questions.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about Malaysian airplane. But anyway, we shouldn't joke. But the point being that kind of yeah, we should all take that advice because, I wouldn't have gotten people to come on my show, even get connected to James. I got connected to James. We did a TED Talk together, TEDx San Diego, back in about 5 or 6 years ago. And we met each other, and I had been listening to him for a long time, really liked him a lot. And I tried to connect to him just back, and but I didn't have any urgency, shall we say. And then earlier last year in 2020, I got connected to Jordan Harbinger, who's a mutual friend, a podcaster as well. And Jordan had me on his show. And after like 2 years of negotiation, basically, like I had to submit all this stuff and all these comments, and it just took a really long time. And it was definitely worth it because Jordan's got a huge audience, huge platform. Podcaster of the Year 2018, like his personal Nobel Prize and your Grammy. But then I said, look, I'm sure people ask you to be connected to guests all the time. I'm happy to connect you to whatever guests I have if you're interested. And Jordan usually turns me down because he thinks a lot of my guests, except for this one, he's going to ask me for a connection to you, I'm sure. He's talking about Kobe Bryant and President Clinton or whatever. So he's got pretty high level guests. But anyway, I said, I'm only going to ever ask you for one introduction. And so far I've kept my word. And I said, I want to be reintroduced to James Altucher. And Jordan did. And, thanks to that, which took, 2 or 3 years in the making, you and I are having this conversation. So kind of, and not being afraid to ask and putting it out there because it risks vulnerability. It risks rejection. And so I think, I can't envision you as shy or timid, but I take your word for it that you must have been. But it's a salute to you that you've grown as a human being and you've benefited by, as we say, going into the impossible. And Jay, I want to thank you. I love talking to you. I'll probably talk to you in a couple of days. And it's just so much fun. I learned from you. And and you're just you're such a professional, and I know you're gonna. If you don't win the Grammy, you get a book out of it. Losing the Grammy prize, I'll help you write it. And I can't wait to do more things together. You're so much. You're one of the bright spots that I get to look forward to whenever we chat. It's a bonus. I get a side bonus when I talk to James. I get to talk to Jay.
It's like a side dish. You have the main course and you have the side dish or the dessert. I don't mind doing that.
That's right. All right, Jay Wujun, yo. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Say hi to New York City. Go and get me a kosher sausage, Dunkin' Donuts sandwich, and
I just had it this morning.
Oh, you did? Awesome.
So every day. So on weekdays, Monday to Friday, every day morning, my breakfast is kosher sausage with coffee and a donut.
Oh my God! Oh, you're making me pine for my ancestral homeland. Your homeland and my homeland will unite them together. I hope we can see each other in person this year. Maybe I'll come out.
Yeah, maybe you should come out to New York because a block from me there's this place called Barney Green Grass.
Oh, I don't know if you've heard of it. Oh, that's famous.
Right. Yeah, the famous Jewish place. Yeah, I only been there once because I moved here and then 6 months later lockdown started. So
yeah. I walked by it. I gained 10 pounds from the lox and the schmear and the bagel. Yep. You get the bagel breath, and you gain 5 pounds. Jay, I can't wait to do that in person. I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person someday.
Okay. Thank you for having me on.
Bye, Jay.
Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.